You'd think that people would have the NES library figured out by now, since it's had about 15 years to sit around. Yet, I'm really surprised Metal Storm goes largely unnoticed and unappreciated. I mean, it's not an absolute masterpiece, it's just a fun little platformer that I never really hear about from others. I'll admit it though, I didn't grow up with this game, and neither did any of my friends. It wasn't until more recent years I found this game looking for hidden little gems that deserve more recognition than they get. And this game matches that description perfectly. Slap that card in and you'll be greeted by a colorful world where you control a mech fighter. A really cool touch given this isn't the typical NES protagonist. You run, jump, and shoot like your typical platforming game, but the entire game changes based off of one gimmick that I have to talk about right off the bat to even be able to talk about the rest of the game. That is the ability to reverse gravity. This entirely changes the angle the creators approach level and enemy design, building around this mechanic and demanding you think with gravity. You've got some neat power-ups over here, now how do I get down? Reverse gravity and jump out. Sometimes there's simple puzzles to solve using the gravity to advance. You'd think with the way I'm explaining it, it would slow down the action of the game, but that's actually not the case at all. It simply becomes part of your toolset. This still has the NES twitch shooting action going on where one bullet kills you and you're constantly blasting away enemies, or trying to move quickly to not get swallowed by the dangers behind you. In later levels, it becomes almost necessary to use the gravity function on the fly to fight and avoid enemies constantly looking for a more advantageous spot. If anything, this mechanic makes some situations more high-strung rather than less, and in my book this is a plus. None of this would have worked though if the controls weren't airtight, and thankfully they're exactly that. I never found myself having any issues shooting, jumping, flipping gravity when I needed, any of those things despite the NES having a limited number of buttons. There isn't much in the way of cheap deaths either. You'll rarely find yourself dying for any other reason than your own mistakes. And trust me, I died a lot. And what a sweet death animation you get as well. I think the graphics are really well done here. There's some really great detail work on the enemies and your mech that you just don't normally see in an NES or 8-bit game. Now, earlier I said this game isn't exactly a masterpiece, and that's for good reason. So now I'm going to talk for a bit on the things I think this game got wrong. You'll spend a fair bit of time on this game due to the difficulty rather than the length of the game. Don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with the challenge it presents, and this in itself is not an issue. The issue I have with the game is that once you beat it, you'll realize it was pretty short. There's only 6 levels in total, and a boss rush level, and each level isn't particularly long. And no, I'm not counting the New Game Plus mode, where if you beat the game, you get to play the same levels all over again, just with more difficult enemies. This actually really hurts the utilization of the gravity feature. I spent those first few levels feeling like I finally got the hang of it, and it had been presented with enough simple puzzles and situations for me to see something even bigger and cooler now that I got the hang of it. And now that I was prepared for what was to come next, it was just over? This game's biggest selling point falls a little short of its potential because of the gameplay length. Another problem this game has that a few friends pointed out to me when I had them play this game is that the backgrounds and the parallax scrolling actually made them a little nauseous. I personally didn't have this problem at all, but it actually made them sick to the point where they couldn't enjoy the game at all. And this wasn't one friend either, it was a few. I guess if you're watching the footage though, you'll know if you fall under this category or not. The last problem with this game is the price. See, I bought this game years ago for $20, and at the time I could have recommended this to anyone looking for something unique and unheard of to play on their Nintendo. But between now and then, this game has climbed up to over $100. What in the world happened? I didn't even know it had this insane price jump until I was halfway done with this review. And given that it hasn't had any sort of virtual console re-release, it makes it hard for me to recommend this game to anyone besides hardcore collectors. In the end though, this is a neat platformer that tried something very unique for its time. If you have the chance to give it a try, it's really worth the experience, as the only game I can think of that even tried to make gravity the central point of their game in this fashion is VVV. What a name, I'm surprised I got the number of V's right. But this game is no Earthbound, and there's no way the gameplay experience is worth the asking price in my book.